I'm Phil Noble with Envision, South Carolina, and we're here today to talk to an extraordinary human being, Anita Zucker. She is Chairman and CEO of InterTech Group, the second largest privately held company in South Carolina. But even more important than the business, she is one of this state's leading and most active advocates for education in this state. And it's an unusual combination of a passionate business person, a passionate educator, and someone who's extraordinarily successful in both. So thank you, Anita, for coming to talk to us today.
I'm Anita Zucker. I came to South Carolina 34 years ago, and when I arrived, I was a teacher. And who knew that 4.5 years ago I would have to become Chairperson and CEO of a globally owned, family-owned holding company that has really changed my life. I've been through happy times and I've been through some tragic and sad times, and that's actually how I got into the spot that I'm in today. But the good news is I'm making the most of it and moving forward, and I keep on going every day, and I'm extremely passionate about my family, my business, and about education for all of the people of South Carolina.
You grew up in Florida, right?
I did.
And went to elementary school and college in Florida?
I did. I attended public schools, and I went to the University of Florida, and I am a proud member of the Gator Nation.
You're a Gator Nation person. And that's where you met your husband at Florida?
Actually, I met Jerry in Jacksonville, Florida, because his parents were my teachers. They taught me religious school, and they introduced us. So it's a wonderful story. And in my religion, in Judaism, you know, people say that they make a match, or in Yiddish, a shidduch. Right. Well, Jerry and I were matched by his parents, and it turned into a wonderful match. And we really had a terrific life, and unfortunately it was cut short by a terrible disease, by cancer. But
before you came to South Carolina, what'd you think of the place? What was your impression of what South Carolina was before you moved from Florida?
Well, I didn't really know a lot about South Carolina. I knew that Jerry's family had come to South Carolina after they left Israel in the early 50s. And so at least I had that knowledge of South Carolina. I knew there was a nice Jewish community here, and that was going to be something that was important to me, because we had lived in a place where we were probably 2 of 10 Jewish people in the community before we left Florida. So I was kind of excited to be moving someplace with a Jewish community, and also finally was able to get a job in the public schools here. So I was looking forward to it, and life was really just starting because we brought our new baby with us, and we were ready to roll.
And you started teaching school. Where did you teach?
I taught at Lamb's Elementary School, which was, you know, one of the Charleston County schools. It was an incredibly unique school in that it was right next door to the Charleston Air Force Base. And so all the kids that I taught were children of people in the Air Force. And so I met a lot of people in the Air Force, from the base commander, taught the base commander's son that first year, to everyone that were both officers as well as enlisted men. So it was a very diverse population, but all Air Force.
What did you teach?
I taught English and history that first year, because my school went from kindergarten through 7th grade. The first year I was here, they didn't have the middle school concept yet in North Charleston.
So you taught all different levels?
I taught 7th grade, but I taught 3 classes of English and a class of social studies, and which was history essentially. And I enjoyed it. I loved teaching English. It was a lot of fun. It was a challenge with that age group, because 7th grade is the most unique age of developmental stage of life.
The hormones are running wild.
They are running wild. So it was different for me. I had taught 4th and 5th grade in Florida, and so it was definitely something I had to get used to, but I was happy that I did it.
Were you a good teacher? Were you good at it?
I hope so. I felt like I was. I've certainly worked hard at being creative, and worked hard at encouraging and hopefully inspiring my students. And it was tough being in a school where your children were in the Air Force, because they weren't the kids that stayed around that you could you know, touch years from the time you taught them. But the thing is, I know I had an impact on some of them.
You were teaching with other South Carolina teachers. What was your impression of sort of South Carolina schools? Had you taught in Florida before?
I had taught in Florida.
What was your sort of initial comparative thoughts on South Carolina and Florida education?
Well, unfortunately, we were behind.
I mean, it was apparent to you from the beginning?
It was, because in Florida, during the time I was teaching, they had implemented a program where your student could not pass if they didn't achieve certain goals and standards and objectives within your grade level. If your child was not successful at learning those skills, they couldn't go on to the next grade. So social promotion had come to a halt. And we really had to look at every child and their skill sets before we could promote them to the next grade. And unfortunately, when I got here, there was a lot of social promotion, and I just don't think the kids learned as many skills as they needed to have before they moved on to the next grade.
Did you have any sense of how Air Force kids from all over the country, all over the world, how they compared to South Carolina students?
Well, a lot of the students that I taught were enlisted men students, so they were really very comparable to anyone else. When I had officers' children, you could see the difference if they had traveled the world. And having the base commander's son, that child had traveled a lot more than I had. Yeah. And so he was very worldly and a much more global young person, and it impacted his writing and his work in a really positive manner.
Interesting. And in terms of the business, when y'all came, the business was, how big was the business? Did y'all start InterTech here?
InterTech started after we got here, yes. We were here for about 4 years before we started, and Jerry started that business. I can't really take credit. I was having babies while he was growing our business, so during that same year we had the birth of a child and the birth of a business, and they each took 9 months. So I feel like they were very comparable.
Do you remember anything any sort of frustration or any sense of excitement about South Carolina? I mean, as someone starting a business in South Carolina, I mean, do you remember Jerry talking about advantages or disadvantages or special problems related to South Carolina?
No, none of that really. It was all about being in Charleston and about being able to start a business and having the opportunity and taking advantage of working with bankers and with other people who trusted us to give it a shot. And you know, I'm really proud of what Jerry was able to achieve, and I think he could have done it anywhere. We just happened to be in South Carolina, and we had the incredible opportunity, and we didn't have any issues at that point in time because we were in South Carolina. So South Carolina just helped us, and honestly, I have to feel really good about South Carolina and being here and the opportunity and the chances that our family received. And so for our family, we really cared about sharing and giving back and making a difference because we were lucky in South Carolina.
I'm not sure luck was the key ingredient, but maybe. But the business early on, it was manufacturing, right? And it started with composites here in terms of a manufacturing facility in North Charleston, right?
We were in North Charleston. We were making everything from expansion joints out of rubber products to things that were very high heat resistant. And it's funny because we're still in a business that makes products that are high heat resistant and fire resistant. So it's very interesting that there are some relationships among the businesses through the years. But you know, Jerry was a scientist in his own right, and for him, doing research and development was something that he loved, and he was really able to take us to new heights.
Yeah, I may have told you this at one time. He and I were on the same plane to New York one day, and we walked out and happened to be in the taxi line together. And he said, "You want to share a taxi?" So I said, "Great." So we started into town, and there was some huge wreck on the bridge, and he and I spent 2 hours just sitting on the bridge talking. It was one of the most fascinating 2 hours conversation I ever had. And one of the things that really impressed me was he was as comfortable talking about China as he was North Charleston or the Middle East. I mean, his global vision was not just broad, but it was incredibly deep and incredibly insightful. And how did he do that? How did he gain and develop that insight living here in South Carolina?
He traveled the world, and because of our businesses, he was able to grow our businesses around the world, but he also got to know people in the governments of these other countries, and so he was able to grasp an incredible depth of knowledge, not just because he traveled and he learned history of the places or saw different cities or towns, but he also went down to the grassroots levels if he was in plants or in facilities that we might be interested in other parts of the world. He got to know the people that worked within those operations, and through the different people that he met along the way, he learned a tremendous amount and really was able to have this incredible depth of knowledge. I don't have that same depth of knowledge that he had of the world because my travels were less. I was home raising children while he was off growing and creating this incredible business that we have today.
And what's the sort of rough allocation of your business activities in terms of South Carolina, U.S., and then various places globally?
Well, it's hard to put numbers on
Sure.
anything, but what I can tell you is we have some operations here in Charleston, and we're building a new plant that will be up and running sometime during the first quarter of next year. We have another facility in Rock Hill, South Carolina. When we can, we try to do business with other partners in South Carolina. I think that's really important to know, that we do try to work within those partnerships to keep a lot of business here. And then we have businesses from really all along the entire East Coast. In other countries, we have them south of the border and we have them north of the border. And we have quite a lot of businesses within North America. And we do business all over the world. However, our major manufacturing operations, I would say, are in North America, all over North America.
Manufacturing, everybody knows manufacturing is moving to the developing world, et cetera. I mean, do you have to struggle to make a business case to stay in South Carolina for some of that stuff? I mean, do you
Sometimes
pay a price
you do.
for it?
You do pay a price. However, the good news is we're all working hard on it. Those of us in the business community, in my opinion, are now aligned, and everyone is beginning to understand that it's about education. We have to be aligned and know that we have to provide the best opportunities and the access to education for our children. We have to allow them to experience what goes on in the world so that it makes it worthwhile for us to stay here. We have to have people that are trained with different competencies that can be used in any advanced manufacturing arena, whether it's aerospace or automotive or marine, whatever we need. We need to have students who can take the skill sets that they are given that they can use in any industry, and that can happen. It doesn't just have to be about aerospace. It doesn't only have to be about marine, but we've got to create skills that are transferable, and we've really got to work hard at training students in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And if we can make certain that we are providing the best educational opportunities to young people, then we can stay in South Carolina. We have to pay attention to our costs as a state. What does it cost a business to build a plant here? Is it affordable? Can we still, pay the utility rates and the land rates and the insurance rates and deal with the regulatory issues in a way that makes it worthwhile having our business in South Carolina? If we can make those things happen, then there's no reason not to locate here. But we've got to create world-class education for our students and make certain that they begin to have knowledge of the world, because we are already a global community in this region and really in our entire state. So we're going to have to be appealing to the entire globe.
So you think education is the single most important thing we got to do?
I do. I absolutely believe that. I think, again, we have to provide opportunities. And today with technology, students can see the world. They don't have to travel. They don't have to leave South Carolina to see the world. They just have to be given the opportunities, whether it's going online, whether it's using cameras. We do a lot of video conferencing, but we have to allow young people the chance to see what's happening in other parts of the world so they understand what needs to happen here. And we need to give them the opportunity to learn other languages as well. In other countries, students begin by learning their language, okay, of the country they live in, but they're also taught English. Right. And when they're young, they can absorb so much education, and we need to do a much better job of making our children into global individuals and giving them those opportunities. And you know, just being in South Carolina, if they haven't even gone to the ocean, we need to make certain that we take our children and let them see the incredible things that exist first in our state, and then we can show them the world in our country. We live in a beautiful state. We have an incredible environment, of incredible beauty, and that is enticing and inviting for people from all over the world. So we know that we're already a place people want to come. We were just voted #1 in Condé Nast magazine, you know, #1 city in the world. So we're already global. We just now have to make sure we're doing everything so that we can stay that way and make certain that we also have our citizens understand what that means.
In terms of the education system, what part of the education system do you think we're most lacking in, or we need to focus on?
I think we really need to focus on birth through 12, okay? We need to focus on each child, where they come from the minute they're born, and make certain that we're training parents so that they know how to take care of their babies and make them healthy. If they're healthy, then they're going to be able to learn, and then we have to help parents understand what they need to do to help their children so that those kids also have early learning opportunities, because at the age of 3, they are huge sponges. That is like the greatest time for learning. And so we're going to have to really do this job of not only educating the child, but their parents along the way. And I'm working currently on an initiative in this region called Cradle to Career. And it really is about training children from the moment they're born and helping them all the way through so that they can then have a successful career. And it doesn't always mean that they have to go to college, and it just means that we need to provide them with every opportunity along the way so that they have a plan for themselves and they're not just floundering after they're educated. And the thing is, they also have to know that if they get a degree, they're not finished. Right. That piece of paper doesn't end your education, it's lifelong.
Talk more about the Cradle to Careers. What's the scope? Where is it located? How long has it been around? How many kids in it? What's the substantive process?
Well, it's brand new for this state, okay, in this region. Cradle to Career, it is going to be from birth until careers. In Cincinnati, they call it Strive. It's been around for a number of years, and they've got 5 years of metrics in the books already. They came up with a like vocabulary, and it's for all kids from 0 through college through 20. Okay, 0 through 20. We're going to do the same thing here. We are modeling after some of the work they've done in Cincinnati, and then Alignment Nashville is another of the Cradle to Career opportunities. So we're also looking at what they've done, and in Nashville they looked at their graduation rates. 5 years ago they were 68%. Graduation rate. Right. Now it's 82%.
Wow.
So
that's a big deal.
Yes, they've concentrated on different areas, and we've had a year so far. We've been working on this initiative. We have metrics and benchmarks created for academics, where every child should be along a continuum from birth through 20. And then we've also measured the family and the social indicators and metrics that our students need to meet to make it along that continuum. And if a child can't read by 3rd grade, prison cells are being built for those numbers of people, because if they're not successful at that level, they may not be successful throughout their life. If they can't pass 8th grade algebra or 9th grade algebra, they're highly likely not going to make it into college. And so there are a lot of benchmarks of that nature we're focusing on. And as I said, we're 1 year into the planning stages of this. We've just developed a governance structure, and we are getting ready to put the top tier, which is called a community transformation team. We're getting ready to put that team into place. So we're out in the community getting ready to nominate people to serve on something that will truly help us transform this community. And we have the nonprofits at the table, we have the businesses at the table, we have our governments at the table. The higher ed presidents in this region are all at the table. I'm really proud of this, and we have some of our elected officials at the table. So I think we've brought together some great stakeholders in trying to make this happen.
That's terrific, that really is. And did you start, is this your idea?
Well, I was one of the people that had the idea along with our United Way, and we've been working together. I went with a group of people from the Regional Development Alliance to Cincinnati, and I was told to ask about it while I was on the trip to hear about what they had done. And so that sort of began my process with it. And then our United Way got involved, and they had heard about the same thing, and the Community Foundation and our Chamber of Commerce got involved, and so now we're all working together, the CRDA, the Chamber, all of us. And that to me is critically important, that we're all aligned now,
right,
and we all understand, and the business leaders understand that this is necessary. So I'm really excited. All of our superintendents, we're including all 4 school districts in this region. They've all been at the table as well. So we can't do it without all of these pieces. It's a puzzle, giant puzzle we're putting together, but it's going to take this region working together to make it happen.
You know, one of my pet peeves is, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's success all over the world. And, you know, we in South Carolina tend to have this, well, if it wasn't invented here, we're not too excited about it. Have you run into that with this project? I mean, are people in somewhat parochial about it or not?
Well, that happens around some other projects I've been involved with over the last 7 years around the state that are incredible projects. Our government tends to not give us the time to develop our projects. They might say, okay, here's the legislation, let's do it. We do it for 5 years and they say, we're done, move on to the next one. Right. Well, in 5 years, you haven't even had time to truly measure whether you've been successful or not. So we have some wonderful things that exist in this state, but we have to give them time. And we haven't had people yet jumping off of this bandwagon. They're jumping on this bandwagon, the cradle to career bandwagon. And I'm really excited. And we've had to move to larger facilities when we have our stakeholders meetings because so many people are showing up for those meetings. But we literally have spent a year with a facilitated process of talking through and having working groups, working on all of these different issues, experts in these different fields coming together to work to pull this together, and we are just ready to roll.
That's terrific. You talked about state government being a problem because they're limited vision. Talk a little bit more about your experience with South Carolina state government and what it needs to be doing and is not doing, and what is it doing well?
We have some wonderful people in our government, and the one thing I would like for them to realize is the critical need for education, because we don't invest. That's the issue I have with our state government. We don't invest in education because they haven't made the connection yet that education equals economic development. You know, they talk about jobs, they want to bring jobs, and that's wonderful. I'm glad they want to bring jobs. But if we don't provide an educated workforce, we can't fill the jobs. Plus, we are approaching a time right now where baby boomers are getting ready to retire. There are going to be a lot of retirements in a variety of different segments of our population, whether it's in healthcare or in industry, in teaching. We're going to have a lot of retirements. Who's going to follow these people? Who's going to take care of us when we need someone to take care of us if we don't provide the education? And I think another issue I have is the investment in higher ed. Higher ed is such an important piece of this state because that is who trains. It trains the people that work in K through 12, and then it trains the future workforce, especially those people who are engineers and working in these fields where we really need scientists, we really need technology to get ahead. We've got to invest in it, and we don't do that. we cut that. We dropped majorly in terms of our investment level in the country in higher ed institutions. And it's very disappointing to me because amazing research is taking place, amazing things are being invented, things are being patented, but we've got to take them to commercialization. And the private sector can't do everything. We need our state to work with us because we do have the opportunity to bring tremendous amounts of revenue back if we invest in the right places. Right. So, from that perspective, I have a problem with some of the things our government does because I think they lack some understanding in those areas. They do other things that are fine, they do good work, they give their time, their energy, and I appreciate that. But we are ready to move forward as a state. We're ready to really be that global entity that we talked about. We must be, or we're going to lose some stature. We've got to be able to play in the world.
Imagine for a moment you're in an airplane. I'm sure you're sitting up front, not in the back, and you're flying to Europe or wherever, and the guy sitting next to you or the woman sitting next to you is a business person who's works for some major global company and is trying to decide where to put a plant or where to make an investment. What would you tell them as to why South Carolina?
Well, I would tell them that in South Carolina, we're now focused more on workforce development. We're focusing more on the kinds of needs that a business would have if they're to choose South Carolina. I think we have wonderful environment. Coming to South Carolina, if you want to bring people, look at what we have around us. If you go in the upstate, you have the beautiful mountains. If you come to the low country, you have the oceans. We have rivers. We have lots of opportunity for recreation because we have this incredible environment, but we also have to provide the education, and we're really working hard now to try to change whatever the levels have been, and so I think we can provide ultimately for a trained workforce. We have a government who does understand what they need to do to get people to want to come here, but we need them to work together with us so that we're providing all of the pieces that would allow us to bring companies here. And I do work on economic development whenever I have that opportunity to meet with people from other countries or from other states that want to bring businesses here. I think we have a great story to sell and a great location and a community that's working hard to make a difference.
What is the one thing that you think makes South Carolina unique in business terms? What is our unique selling proposition? What's the one thing that we ought to be standing on the rooftops crowing about every day and that makes us unique and different and special?
Wow, that's a really tough question. I just think we're unique and special because of our location. Also the fact that we're a relatively small state in terms of population. Mm-hmm. You have the ability to touch our members of government. You have the ability to get to them. Yeah. And we have the ability to make things happen because we're a little bit smaller than some places. So I think, knowing that, to me, that is a wonderful opportunity because we know who we can talk to try to make things happen. And I think that's really special when you can get to the people at the top and they'll listen. Yeah. Will they do it? I don't know if they'll always come through. However, you can find them and you can get to them. And I mean, that is something to crow about.
That is. Let me ask you one last question, then let you think about what we missed. Assume for the moment today that we crowned you Queen Anita of South Carolina. You're the queen. We got a crown back there somewhere we'll give you. And you have unlimited powers and we all do what you say. What are the first three things you do as Queen of South Carolina?
Well, the first thing I would want to do would be break the poverty cycle. I would really like to see that poverty cycle broken and give every child the opportunity to be able to grow up in a world of equity and equality in every way, whether it's food, clothing, and shelter, or education. I think every child deserves a chance. And that's something that I think we don't do as well as I'd like us to do. A number of the initiatives we're working on in this area, I hope will help to make that happen. But to me, that would be the first thing I would want to see happen because There are so many people here that can't get jobs. They're a part of that poverty cycle. They don't have the ability to be retrained, or they don't know how to be retrained because of the life that they've had to live. I'd like to change their lives. That would be the first thing I would want to do. So break the poverty cycle and truly change their lives, and then provide the opportunity for education. That is a key. Education is a key that unlocks every door. And then access to health care. They've got to have good access to health care, because that too, you can't even get that if you're not educated. You won't know who to turn to. So to me, breaking the poverty cycle, educating people, and making certain that they're healthy are the three things I'd like to start with, because then it creates a healthy community, a healthy state, and people can make things happen for themselves. They won't depend on us to make it happen for them, because they'll be able to think and create their own opportunities. And to me, we need to create a world where people have the ability to think and be smart and make decisions and work together, and those would be some of the ways that I would do that.
Sounds like South Carolina would be a great place under Queen Anita.
Thank you so much. I think for a young person today, they really do need an education. I know that not every business will require a degree, and not every skill requires a degree. We still need people to have skills to work with their hands. Okay, they need a trade and they need a skill, but they also need to have exposure to the world. And I would love to see young people have opportunities to see other things happening around the world, but they've got to be educated. I still have to somehow go back to degrees and having those college degrees, but at the same time earning different certificates. But go out and have opportunities. Go out and work with someone. Find a mentor. Every young person should have someone serving as a mentor to them, whether it's their own parents or whether it's someone else in the world that they look up to. And I will have to give Jerry some credit. He always said, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. So kids really need to focus on what it is they love and that they truly want to do, because then they'll be happy if they're in the world they want to be in. But they have to have the exposure to be able to figure out what that world is. Envision, South Carolina. Globally connected, world class. I knew that Jerry's family had come to South Carolina after they left Israel in the early 50s. And so at least I had that knowledge of South Carolina. I knew there was a nice Jewish community here, and that was going to be something that was important to me, because we had lived in a place where we were probably 2 of 10 Jewish people in the community before we left Florida. So I was kind of excited to be moving someplace with a Jewish community, and also finally was able to get a job in the public schools here. So I was looking forward to it, and life was really just starting because we brought our new baby with us, and we were ready to roll.
And you started teaching school. Where did you teach?
I taught at Lamb's Elementary School, which was, one of the Charleston County schools. It was an incredibly unique school.
I'm Phil Noble with Envision, South Carolina, and we're here today to talk to an extraordinary human being, Anita Zucker. She is Chairman and CEO of InterTech Group, the second largest privately held company in South Carolina. But even more important than the business, she is one of this state's leading and most active advocates for education in this state. And it's an unusual combination of a passionate business person, a passionate educator, and someone who's extraordinarily successful in both. So thank you, Anita, for coming to talk to us today.
I'm Anita Zucker. I came to South Carolina 34 years ago, and when I arrived, I was a teacher. And who knew that 4.5 years ago I would have to become Chairperson and CEO of a globally owned, family-owned holding company that has really changed my life. I've been through happy times and I've been through some tragic and sad times, and that's actually how I got into the spot that I'm in today. But the good news is I'm making the most of it and moving forward, and I keep on going every day, and I'm extremely passionate about my family, my business, and about education for all of the people of South Carolina.
You grew up in Florida, right?
I did.
And went to elementary school and college in Florida?
I did. I attended public schools, and I went to the University of Florida, and I am a proud member of the Gator Nation. And that it was right next door to the Charleston Air Force Base. And so all the kids that I taught were children of people in the Air Force. And so I met a lot of people in the Air Force, from the base commander, taught the base commander's son that first year, to everyone that were both officers as well as enlisted men. So it was a very diverse population, but all Air Force.
What did you teach?
I taught English and history that first year because my school went from kindergarten through 7th grade. The first year I was here, they didn't have the middle school concept yet in North Charleston.
So you taught all different levels?
I taught 7th grade, but I taught 3 classes of English and a class of social studies, and which was history essentially.
You're a Gator Nation person. And that's where you met your husband at Florida?
Actually, I met Jerry in Jacksonville, Florida because his parents were my teachers. They taught me religious school, and they introduced us. So it's a wonderful story. And in my religion, in Judaism, you know, people say that they make a match, or in Yiddish, a shidduch. Right. Well, Jerry and I were matched by his parents, and it turned into a wonderful match. And we really had a terrific life, and unfortunately it was cut short by a terrible disease, by cancer. But
before you came to South Carolina, what'd you think of the place? What was your impression of what South Carolina was before you moved from Florida?
Well, I didn't really know a lot about South Carolina.